guys. Welcome to your first Honors Forensic Science presentation. Just as a heads up, I'm a little sick as I'm recording this, so you may hear me sound a little funny or clear my throat or cough, but of course you can't get it while I'm teaching you through the computer. So let's get started with our Intro to Forensic Science. So what is forensic science? So forensic science is science as it pertains to the law. It deals with identification, collection, and examination of evidence for use in court. So specifically, crimes, essentially. Criminalistics is the scientific examination of physical evidence, whereas criminology includes a psychological angle, studying crimes for motive, traits, and behavior. And we will delve into that later this year. The crime lab is made up of various different units. So let's start looking at what some of those units are. Physical science unit, this is my thing. They examine things like soil, glass, paint, blood spatter patterns, and fibers. And they use primarily chemistry, physics, and geology to help them figure things out. Biology unit, they're looking at your body fluids, your DNA, your blood factors, your plant matter, your bugs, all those things. So they're using biology, biochemistry, and microbiology. The fun one, we have the firearms unit. Okay, so they're looking at your bullets and shell casings, your weapons, your trajectories, your tool marks. They're using mathematics and physics to help figure these things out. We have our document analysis unit. They're looking at your handwriting, your typewriting, now looking at word processing and computer applications, paper and ink, and really now this is driven primarily by computer science. It's really cool stuff that's happening these days. Really major crime labs in, say, places like New York City, Chicago, they may also have units for arson. They may do polygraphs. They have a special unit just for evidence collection. Forensic odontology, which is the looking at teeth, odontology. Forensic entomology, which is your bugs, which sometimes can fall under the biology heading, or it can be its own independent unit. And then, of course, digital forensics. The criminal justice and the law. So some important terms. The U.S. Constitution, we know that's the supreme law of the land. It trumps all other laws. Statutory means it's a written or codified law enacted by a government body. Okay, this is based on the Constitution. We have common law or case law, okay, which is law made by judges applying to the statutory and constitutional law. Then we have civil law, which involves relationships between people. We have criminal law, which deals with the regulation and enforcement of rights. Equity laws, okay, deals with remedial or preventative measures like restraining orders and injunctions. And then we have administrative law. Those are rules established by agencies such as the IRS. All right, let's look at what the Bill of Rights, how the Bill of Rights pertains to crimes and criminal studies. So under the Bill of Rights, individuals have the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty, not to be searched unreasonably, not to be arrested without probable cause. It's the right against unreasonable seizure of personal property, against self-incrimination, to fair questioning by the police, to protection from physical harm throughout the judicial process, to an attorney, to a trial by jury, to know any charges against oneself, to cross-examination of prosecution witnesses, to speak and present witnesses, not to be tried again for the same crime, often called double jeopardy, against cruel and unusual punishment, to due process, to a speedy trial, against excessive bail, against excessive fines, and to be treated the same as others regardless of race, gender, religious preference, country of origin, and other personal attributes. Now, the Bill of Rights gives you all of these things. Doesn't mean they have always been rightfully given to people. Sometimes people have not been given these justly, and that's where we have problems. And we continue today to have problems with giving everybody their rights according to the Bill of Rights. Specific rights by amendment. We have the Fourth Amendment, which is against unreasonable searches and seizures, and you must have probable cause for a warrant. The Fifth says that felonies must be indicted against, it's against double jeopardy, against self-incrimination, and includes due process. Sixth gives you the right to a speedy trial, to be informed of the charges against you, confront witnesses, subpoena power for evidence for a defendant, and gives you the right to assistance of counsel. The eighth protects you from no excessive bails or fines and no cruel or unusual punishment. And then the 14th says that all these rights apply to the states, not just the federal government. When I was making your card sort for this, my husband completed it, and he has also informed me that the 14th also includes due process. So just a heads up. And so maybe you want to look into how the 14th Amendment includes due process, because apparently that's a big thing out there. All right, jurisdiction. So we have different levels of jurisdiction. We have federal, state, criminal, and civil court. The judicial process. All right, a crime is committed, and then evidence is collected, and a suspect may be identified. The investigation is conducted, and then it is given to the district attorney. If there's enough evidence for probable cause, an arrest warrant is issued. So a probable cause says that a reasonable person would look at the evidence and conclude that a crime has been committed, and that the person that's being arrested did that crime, right? The suspect is arrested, they're fingerprinted, photographed, and they are read their Miranda rights. So what does it mean to read their Miranda rights? I'm sure you've heard them before. Rights have to do with, in 1963, Ernesto Miranda was arrested. He was a mentally disturbed man, and he was accused of kidnapping and raping a woman in Phoenix. He was brought in for questioning, and he confessed to the crime, but he was not told that he didn't have to speak and that he had the right to a lawyer present. So his lawyers tried to get the confession thrown out, but it was denied, and the case made it all the way up to the Supreme Court. The court ruled that the statements could not be used since Mr. Miranda had not been advised his rights. So now when police arrest you, they read you your Miranda rights. So how many times have you heard this on TV? You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to speak to an attorney and to have an attorney present during questioning. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you at the government's expense. All right, everybody know that one? All right, if you ever get arrested, which hopefully that will never happen, make sure that they read you your Miranda rights. If they don't, then there's a problem. All right, so let's continue. For felonies, a grand jury must issue an indictment. Okay, an indictment is formal charges. Okay, and then the defendant is arraigned. Okay, at an arraignment, you hear your charges and you enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. All right, then discovery is the next step. You often don't hear about this on those on crime shows. Okay, so whatever comes out of the state's investigation has to be given to the defendant so that they can see what is happening. They cannot hide any evidence that they have. They have to share it. Then after that, a trial occurs, and then the jury deliberates, and then the jury returns and gives a verdict. All right? If they say you are guilty of your crime, then you will receive sentencing, and then you can go through the process of appeals. Guilt. So the district attorney has to prove that the defendant is guilty, okay? Because you are not guilty until proven otherwise. So they have to prove you had means or the ability to commit the crime, a motive, a reason to commit it, and you have to have the opportunity so that you have to be placed at the scene of the crime. So types of crimes. So we've been talking mostly about felonies. So let's look at some of the other types of crimes. We have an infraction. All right, that's a minor matter like a noise violation, something that happens, speeding sometimes, in small speeding. Then you have your misdemeanors, okay? A misdemeanor has a maximum penalty of 1 year in jail in North Carolina. All right, there's 3 classes. Class 3 is possession of less than half an ounce of marijuana. Class 2 is trespassing. Class 1 is driving under the influence. And Class A1 is an assault on a female, which is an interesting one. Why it's an assault on just a female? Well, somebody may want to look into that one. All right, and then felonies. Let's look at felonies. Are go from a class A, which is premeditated murder, to class I, which is possession of greater than 1/2 an ounce of marijuana, which is considered possession of marijuana with the intent to distribute. All right, the sentences range from 6 months to the death penalty, and forensics is involved primarily in felonies. Federal rules of evidence. In order for evidence to be admissible in court, it must be probative. It must actually prove a material fact in the case, and it must be material, address an issue that is relevant to the particular crime. Some things that talk about admissibility of evidence. Okay, in Fry versus the United States in 1923, they said that admissibility is determined by it's generally accepted by the relevant scientific community, and there's no guidance on reliability, and the jury decides if it can be used. However, in 1993, that has been changed with Daubert versus Dow. All right, they have changed the rules, and they say admissibility is determined by if the theory is unique or can be tested, if science has been offered for peer review, which we've discussed in biology class, if the rate of error is acceptable, if the method at issue enjoys widespread acceptance, if the opinion is relevant to the issue, and the judge decides if the evidence can be used. So what they have said is no pseudoscience in the courtroom. They really, if you're going to bring science and evidence, it needs to be legitimate. And it, so if you have somebody who denies the Holocaust, because it is not a generally widespread acceptance, it would probably not be allowed in a courtroom in the United States these days. All right, so Yogi Berra, former New York Yankees catcher, said you can learn a lot just by watching. So let's look at types of evidence. So there's 2 general types. We have the testimonial, which are statements made under oath. And this is direct or prima facie evidence. And then we have physical, any object or material that is relevant in a crime. So we have the indirect evidence, which is circumstantial evidence. And then we have, that would be your hair, fiber, fingerprints, documents, blood, soil, drugs, tool marks, that's misspelled, impressions, and glass, and all of those things. All right, what is testimonial evidence? So it is oral or written statements given to the police by people who witnessed the event. It can be very useful, and it can have a huge outcome in an investigation, but it can be right or wrong. And why could it be right or wrong? It's called selective attention. All right, people decide what they want to concentrate on, and but not really. They can decide what to concentrate on, but it's not necessarily conscious decision. So in a busy scene, it's really impossible to notice everything at once. All right. What a person pays attention is what they select to pay attention to. All right. So it's not necessarily conscious. So let's look at some memory. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to view the next screen. I want you to memorize all 20 items you see. All right. You cannot write anything down, and you, of course, can't talk to anybody else, and you cannot pause this video, and I will be timing it on this video. All right, you ready? Get started. What do you remember? Now you have time. I'm going to give you a minute to write down how many you could remember. Maybe you remember a banana, or a nail, or a pen. All right. Check your, here you go. You can pause the video to check your work here, but I'm going to go ahead and move on. So if you want to pause it to check, see what you got. Class will discuss about what you were able to recall. We'll compare it with your classmates, and then we'll talk about factors that made your brain select. So if you want to make notes about these questions to bring up, that would be awesome. So we'll talk about this. Be talking a lot about the Innocence Project over this quarter, but according to the Innocence Project, eyewitness misidentification is the single greatest cause of wrongful convictions, playing a role in more than 75% of convictions overturned through DNA. We are going to read a book about one of those convictions where the wrong person was misidentified by the not the eyewitness, but the victim. However, we still rely a lot on eyewitness identification for investigating and prosecuting crimes. So, what factors affect a person's memory and their ability to identify a suspect? Let's look at this. Age, okay, may play a role. Okay, both young children and elderly perform well when the actual culprit is in the lineup, but when it doesn't contain the culprit, there's a higher rate of mistaken identifications. A lot of times people think they've been called in because the right person's in the lineup and they just pick somebody, but it doesn't necessarily mean that person is there. We also have race, the cross-race effect. It's a phenomenon. People are better able to recognize faces of their own race than those of other races. All right. Of course, the use of drugs has a huge effect on your ability to recall the events of a crime, even if you're no longer under the influence. If you were smoking or drunk when the crime occurred, your ability to remember that is very much compromised. And then your memory can be influenced by other witnesses, investigators, or the media. Again, we'll read more about that in the book we're reading this quarter, how other witnesses can really influence us. Open-ended questioning. So there's a real changing field in how questioning of victims occurs, so that we don't lead them on and that we actually get a correct identification. All right. Crime scene and suspect factors. A crime that is extremely traumatic may affect the eyewitness. Um, if you, for example, if you have a weapon, they focus more on the weapon than the perpetrator's face. If you are able to focus on the perpetrator's face for a minute or longer, of course, you'll do better than someone who only saw it for a few seconds. Faces that are highly attractive or highly unattractive or distinctive are more likely to be accurately recognized. So I always like to laugh at the mug shots where the people have facial tattoos, because you're very likely to be identified in a crime if you have a facial tattoo, because that is a very distinctive and unique thing to have. And simple disguises such as hat or sunglasses can really interfere with eyewitness identification. All right. And Like I said, body piercings and tattoos increase the likelihood. And those tattoos don't necessarily have to be on your face. They can be on your arms or on your ankle. Because if they're looking down and they say, oh, they have a clover leaf on their ankle, they can really point that out. And there's probably not a lot of people who have a clover leaf on their right ankle or something. And that would help narrow it down. The time of day and the person's view of the scene can affect eyewitness reports, and also if they're familiar or not with the area, what will affect their chances. We're going to look at a scene for 30 seconds. I'm going to time it here on the video. Don't pause the video and cheat. All right, I want you to look at the scene, and then we're going to ask some questions. Go ahead and get started. All right, so I want you to pause the video at this point, and I want you to answer the following questions. Don't go back, but answer the following questions so that we can really get an idea, and we'll talk about this in class. All right, and we'll talk about how much you were able to recall, but you can look at this and see the answers. So write down what the answers are next to your work and see how you did. So of course you can pause now to look over that. All right, so we've warmed up your eyes and your brain. All right, we're going to test your observation skills. So you've gotten it, okay? So you're going to have 30 seconds to view a photograph of a crime scene. All right, I want you to pay attention to all the details you can. All right, but I don't want you to write anything down until the time is up, okay? So keep everything down. Are you ready? Get started. Look. Gave you a lot longer than you need. All right, so pause the video here, all right? And I want you to answer each of the questions on your paper. Check your work, and here are the answers, and have it written down. I look forward to talking to you about this in class. It'll be really interesting to see how people did looking at this crime scene. Have a great night.